Sharks, the ocean's ancient predators, glide through the deep with a sense of purpose unmatched in the animal kingdom. With over 400 species, each one holds a unique story, from the towering great white to the elusive whale shark. Their sleek bodies are finely tuned for hunting, and their senses are finely attuned to their environment. Far from the monsters of myth, sharks play an essential role in ocean ecosystems, maintaining balance in a way few creatures can. They are the ocean's true enigma, fierce, mysterious, and irreplaceable. Gansbaai, South Africa, 2021. The small coastal town of Gansbaai, nestled along South Africa's western cape, had long been known as the great white shark capital of the world. The region's unique ecological conditions created a perfect hunting ground for these apex predators, drawing both sharks and tourists in significant numbers. For decades, the local economy had thrived on shark cage diving expeditions, where thrill seekers could witness these magnificent creatures up close, all from the safety of metal bars. Tanja Petrovic, a 34-year-old Serbian tourist, had arrived in Gansbaai just 3 days before the incident. An avid swimmer with a passion for marine life, she had specifically chosen this destination for her solo vacation to experience the region's rich biodiversity. According to her later social media posts, Petrovic had already completed 2 shark cage diving expeditions, but wanted to experience the waters of Walker Bay from a different perspective. On the morning of March 17th, Petrovic ventured to a secluded stretch of beach approximately 2 kilometers east of the main harbor. The weather was unusually warm for autumn in the region, with calm seas and excellent visibility. Several beachgoers later reported seeing Petrovic arrive alone around 9:30 a.m., setting up her beach gear and entering the water shortly thereafter. Unbeknownst to Petrovic, a local drone enthusiast named Marius van der Merwe had chosen that same morning to test his new professional-grade drone, equipped with 4K video capabilities. Van der Merwe, a wildlife photography hobbyist, had been capturing aerial footage of the coastline for approximately 20 minutes when he noticed a lone swimmer venturing unusually far from shore. Later, in his statement to local authorities, Van der Merwe recalled noticing a large shadow moving beneath the surface approximately 60 meters from where Petrovic was swimming. Initially, he had assumed it was a school of fish or perhaps one of the smaller shark species common to the area. He maneuvered his drone closer to capture the interaction, not yet realizing the gravity of what was about to unfold. The footage, which authorities later confiscated and refused to release publicly, showed Petrovic swimming parallel to the shore, roughly 150 meters from the beach. She appeared relaxed, occasionally rolling onto her back to float. According to marine biologists who later analyzed the video, this particular swimming pattern, combined with Petrovic's black wetsuit, might have resembled the silhouette of a Cape Fur seal when viewed from below, the preferred prey of great white sharks in the region. At around 10:17 a.m., the drone captured a massive 16-foot great white shark approaching from the deeper waters. The shark moved with remarkable speed, accelerating as it neared the surface. Witnesses on shore, who by this point had gathered to watch Van der Merwe's drone flight, reported hearing Petrovic's sudden scream cut horrifically short. The attack was instantaneous and devastating. The shark struck with such force that Petrovic was lifted partially out of the water, according to forensic analysis later conducted by marine biologist Dr. Eliza Thornton. The shark's initial bite exerted approximately 18,000 newtons of pressure, severing Petrovic's head in a single catastrophic strike. 2 off-duty lifeguards, Johannes Bezwedenhout and Andile Mbeki, who had been jogging along the beach, immediately entered the water upon witnessing the attack. Despite their training and quick response, they arrived to find only spreading crimson water. The shark had disappeared as quickly as it had emerged, leaving behind a scene that Bezwedenhout would later describe as the most horrific thing ever witnessed in 15 years of lifeguarding. Coast Guard vessels and a medical helicopter arrived within 20 minutes, but recovery efforts were hampered by concerns about the shark's continued presence in the area. Petrovic's remains were eventually recovered 2 hours later, and the beach was immediately closed to the public. Van der Merwe surrendered his drone and all footage to local authorities, visibly shaken by what he had documented. In a brief statement to local media, he expressed profound regret at having captured such a tragedy and extended his condolences to Petrovic's family. Dr. Thornton, who headed the subsequent investigation, noted that while fatal shark attacks remained extremely rare globally, This incident represented a perfect storm of unfortunate circumstances. This area has always been a natural hunting ground for great whites, she explained in her report. The shark likely misidentified Ms. Petrovich as prey due to her swimming pattern and attire. These animals don't target humans specifically. In fact, they generally avoid us. But mistaken identity can occur, especially in waters with limited visibility. Petrovich's family arrived from Belgrade 4 days later to claim her remains. Her younger sister, Yelena Petrovich, served as the family spokesperson, emphasizing that Tanya had been aware of the risks, but had always found joy in experiencing the ocean's wonders. She requested privacy during their time of mourning and asked that her sister be remembered for her love of adventure rather than the tragic circumstances of her death. The incident prompted local authorities to implement additional safety measures, including expanded drone monitoring of popular swimming areas and improved signage about shark activity. However, marine conservation groups were quick to caution against retaliatory culling efforts, emphasizing that such attacks remained statistically rare and that great whites played a crucial role in maintaining the health of marine ecosystems. For the residents of Gansbai, the incident served as a sobering reminder of the wild nature that surrounded their community, a nature that had provided livelihoods but demanded respect. The local tourism board reported a temporary decrease in shark-related activities, but noted that educational initiatives about shark behavior saw increased participation in the months following the tragedy. The drone footage, secured as evidence, was never released to the public despite numerous media requests. Police Commissioner Vujani Endlovu stated firmly that the graphic nature of the content and respect for the victim's family outweighed any public interest in viewing the attack. The footage remains sealed in police archives, a digital record of a tragic moment when human adventure intersected with the primal force of nature. Gulf of Mexico, 2018. The Gulf of Mexico, with its warm, nutrient-rich waters extending from Florida's southern tip to the Yucatan Peninsula, had been a fisherman's paradise for generations. Its depths harbored an abundance of marine life, drawing both commercial operations and recreational enthusiasts throughout the year. However, these same conditions also attracted numerous predators, including the notoriously aggressive bull shark, a species known for its ability to thrive in both saltwater and freshwater environments. Hank Miller, a 48-year-old commercial fisherman from Galveston, Texas, knew these waters better than most. Having spent nearly 3 decades navigating the Gulf's temperamental moods, Miller had developed an intimate understanding of its rhythms and inhabitants. His vessel, the Sea Hunter, a 32-foot trawler he had purchased 15 years earlier, had become almost an extension of himself. On April 23, 2018, Miller embarked on what was supposed to be a routine fishing expedition with his 2 sons, Brandon and Tyler, aged 22 and 19 respectively. The weather forecast had promised favorable conditions, calm seas with a gentle southeasterly breeze, perfect for their planned 3-day excursion approximately 40 miles offshore. The family trio had completed this same trip numerous times before, typically returning with an impressive haul of red snapper, grouper, and mackerel. The first day passed uneventfully, with moderate success filling their hold. As the afternoon sun began its descent on the second day, the Millers had just hauled in a particularly impressive catch of snapper. According to Tyler's later account, the atmosphere aboard the Sea Hunter had been jovial, with his father and brother sharing old fishing tales and planning the evening meal. It was approximately 4:30 p.m. when Tyler noticed an unusual disturbance in the water about 15 yards from their starboard side. The surface began to churn erratically, with small bait fish leaping frantically into the air, a telltale sign of a predator's approach. Hank, noticing his son's gaze, casually remarked on the common phenomenon, explaining to his son how larger predatory fish often herded baitfish into concentrated bait balls to feed more efficiently. Brandon jokingly suggested a shark might be responsible, a comment that prompted laughter from his father, who assured them that sharks rarely approached active fishing vessels. This confidence, born from decades of experience, contributed to Hank's relaxed posture as he leaned against the gunwale, rinsing fish blood from his hands in the Gulf waters. Without warning, the surface erupted as a bull shark, later estimated to be between 9 and 10 feet in length, lunged toward the boat. The shark's momentum carried it partially out of the water, its powerful jaws grazing Hank's right calf as he attempted to recoil from the sudden attack. The impact knocked him off balance, and to his son's horror, Hank tumbled backward into the water. Tyler would later describe to Coast Guard officials how time seemed to slow in that moment. The bull shark, momentarily startled by the splash, circled back with deliberate, menacing movements. Brandon, acting on instinct rather than training, grabbed a gaff hook and began striking the water's surface, creating noise and disturbance in an attempt to deter the predator. In the water, Hank maintained remarkable composure. Rather than thrashing wildly, a response that might have further triggered the shark's predatory instincts, he focused on reaching the boat's aluminum ladder, which hung just inches above the waterline. The shark, now circling within feet of the disoriented fisherman, made another approach. Using the momentary distraction provided by Brandon's frantic efforts, Hank lunged for the ladder, managing to grasp the bottom rung with both hands. Tyler, positioning himself at the top of the ladder, seized his father's wrists and began pulling with desperate strength. The shark made one final pass, grazing Hank's thigh before disappearing into deeper water. Once safely aboard, the extent of Hank's injuries became apparent. The shark's initial strike had left a series of deep lacerations across his right calf, while the second pass had torn through his wetsuit, leaving superficial abrasions along his left thigh. Though bleeding profusely, none of the wounds appeared to have damaged major arteries or tendons. Brandon immediately applied pressure to the wounds using clean towels, while Tyler radioed the Coast Guard for emergency assistance. Given their distance from shore, a medical evacuation was dispatched by helicopter from a nearby naval air station. The rescue team arrived approximately 40 minutes later, during which time the Millers had successfully stabilized Hank's condition using the vessel's first aid supplies. Medical personnel would later credit the son's quick thinking and their father's calm demeanor as critical factors in preventing a far worse outcome. Dr. Marissa Campos, the emergency physician who treated Hank at the medical center, noted that while the lacerations required 37 stitches in total, the wounds were remarkably clean and had avoided major vascular damage by millimeters. During his 3-day hospital stay, marine biologists from Texas visited Hank to discuss the encounter. Dr. James Whitaker, a specialist in bull shark behavior, explained that the attack was consistent with the species' opportunistic feeding patterns. The combination of fish blood in the water, Hank's dangling limbs, and the shark's naturally aggressive temperament had created a dangerous situation. But fortunately, it fell short of tragedy. The Miller family's experience quickly became a cautionary tale among Gulf Coast fishing communities. Hank, upon his release from the hospital, participated in several safety workshops for commercial and recreational fishermen, emphasizing the importance of using proper safety equipment and protocols when encountering sharks. 6 months after the incident, the Sea Hunter returned to its regular fishing routes, though with several notable modifications. A reinforced safety rail had been installed around the vessel's perimeter, and a retractable aluminum ladder replaced the previous fixed model. More significantly, perhaps, was the psychological impact. Both sons reported their father no longer rinsed his hands in open water and maintained a more vigilant watch during their expeditions. When interviewed for a local newspaper's feature on Gulf safety the following year, Hank described the encounter as a humbling reminder that no matter how familiar these waters become, we remain visitors in their domain. The Miller family continued their fishing tradition, their experience serving as both a personal watershed moment and a valuable lesson for the broader maritime community about respecting the unpredictable nature of the ocean and its inhabitants. Cape Town, South Africa, 2013. The waters surrounding the Cape Peninsula had long been recognized as one of the world's most active hunting grounds for great white sharks. The confluence of cold Atlantic currents with the warmer Indian Ocean created a rich ecosystem that supported diverse marine life, including a significant population of Cape fur seals, the preferred prey of the region's apex predators. For the South African Coast Guard stationed in Cape Town, these treacherous waters represented both their workplace and a constant reminder of nature's raw power. Thabo Ndlovu, a 30-year-old senior Coast Guard member with 8 years of service, had established himself as one of the unit's most capable rescue swimmers. Born in Soweto and raised in Durban, Ndlovu had developed a profound connection with the ocean from an early age, eventually channeling his passion into a distinguished career with the Maritime Authority. His personnel file documented numerous successful rescue operations in challenging conditions, earning him the respect of colleagues and several commendations from his superiors. On July 12, 2013, the Cape Town Coast Guard Station received a distress call at approximately 5:43 a.m. A small fishing vessel, the Umhlanga Star, had failed to return to harbor the previous evening. With deteriorating weather conditions forecast and limited daylight hours during the Southern Hemisphere winter, Commander Patricia Van Wyck immediately authorized a search and rescue mission, and Ndlovu was assigned as the primary rescue swimmer on the operation, accompanied by pilot Marcus Botha and co-pilot Zanelli Dlamini aboard the Eurocopter as 365 Dauphin helicopter. The search grid focused on an area approximately 12 nautical miles southwest of Cape Point, where the fishing vessel had last reported its position. After 90 minutes of methodical scanning, Dlamini spotted debris consistent with a small ship dispersed across a quarter-mile section of choppy waters. The helicopter descended to confirm the finding, and at 7:28 a.m., the team identified the partially submerged hull of the Umhlanga Star. According to Dlamini's subsequent report, Ndlovu immediately began preparing for water deployment. Despite the challenging sea conditions, the water temperature registered at 14 degrees Celsius, with wave heights averaging 1.5 meters, difficult but within operational parameters for an experienced swimmer. Botha positioned the helicopter approximately 30 feet above the water's surface, and at around 7:36 a.m., Ndlovu was lowered into the churning sea. Initial communications between Ndlovu and the helicopter crew remained clear and professional. Upon reaching the water, he reported no signs of survivors near the wreckage, but indicated his intention to investigate the cabin, which remained partially intact. Approximately 3 minutes after deployment, Ndlovu reported that the cabin appeared empty, but noted that several personal flotation devices were missing, which suggested that the survivors might have abandoned the vessel. What happened next would later be reconstructed through the helicopter's camera footage and the traumatized accounts of the aerial crew. As Ndlovu began a broader sweep of the surrounding waters, Dlamini observed a large shadow moving beneath the surface approximately 40 meters from the swimmer's position. Before she could issue a warning, the sea erupted in violent turbulence. A great white shark, later estimated to be 4.8 meters, 16 feet in length, surged from below, striking Ndlovu with catastrophic force. The initial attack targeted his lower body, the shark clamping down with incredible pressure on his right leg. Despite the shock and trauma, radio transmissions revealed Ndlovu's desperate attempt to report the situation. His professionalism evident even in extreme distress, Botha immediately initiated emergency retrieval procedures, lowering the rescue cable while Dlamini maintained visual contact with their colleague. As the cable reached Ndlovu, he managed to secure the harness around his torso with remarkable composure given the circumstances. However, the shark maintained its grip, initiating what marine biologists would later describe as a tug-of-war scenario. For nearly 40 seconds, the helicopter's winch system strained against the opposing force of the shark. Despite the mechanical advantage, the predator's strength proved formidable. Suddenly, the tension released as the shark descended with its prey into deeper water, the cable trailing limply behind. Commander Van Wyck immediately dispatched additional resources, including 2 patrol vessels and a second helicopter equipped with thermal imaging capabilities. The search continued for 14 hours before Ndlovu's body was recovered approximately 2 miles from the initial attack site. Medical examiner Dr. Mbali Nkosi later determined that massive trauma and blood loss had resulted in death within minutes of the initial strike. The subsequent investigation revealed several factors that contributed to the tragedy. Weather satellite data indicated unusually high concentrations of seal activity in the area during the preceding week, potentially drawing more great whites to the region than typical for that time of year. Additionally, the low visibility in the water combined with Ndlovu's black wetsuit might have created conditions for mistaken identity, a common factor in shark attacks. The loss of Thabo Ndlovu sent shockwaves through South Africa's maritime community. His memorial service, held in Cape Town's cathedral, drew hundreds of mourners, including high-ranking officials from the country's naval and coastal authorities. Thabo Ndlovu was posthumously awarded the Order of Mendi for bravery, South Africa's highest honor for courage. In response to the tragedy, the South African Coast Guard implemented significant procedural changes for water rescue operations in areas known for shark activity. These included mandatory aerial shark spotters during swimmer deployment, the introduction of electronic shark deterrent devices for all rescue personnel, and revised protocols restricting water entries in areas with recent predator sightings. Zanele Dlamini, deeply affected by witnessing her colleague's death, later established the Thabo Ndlovu Foundation, which focused on marine safety education and providing support to the families of Coast Guard members who lost their lives in the line of duty. In a poignant address at the Foundation's launch, she described Ndlovu as embodying the Coast Guard motto, "Always ready, always there." The waters off Cape Town continued to exhibit a dual nature, both life-sustaining and life-taking. For those who worked to protect these waters and those who depended on them, Thabo Ndlovu's sacrifice served as a solemn reminder of the ocean's unpredictable power and the courage required to face it day after day. Hurghada, Egypt, 2015. The Red Sea, with its crystalline azure waters and vibrant coral reefs, had long been one of Egypt's premier tourist destinations. The coastal city of Hurghada, once a simple fishing village, has transformed over the decades into a renowned resort hub, attracting visitors from across Europe and the Middle East. Its sheltered beaches and exceptional underwater visibility made it particularly popular among families seeking both relaxation and aquatic adventure. Among these visitors in the summer of 2015 was the Hassan family from Cairo. Nadia Hassan, a 34-year-old university professor of marine biology, had chosen Hurghada specifically for its educational value. Her children, 7-year-old Amir and 5-year-old Layla, had developed an early fascination with marine life, inspired by their mother's profession and passion. This vacation was meant to be both a respite from Cairo's congestion and an opportunity for hands-on learning about Egypt's maritime treasures. On June 18th, their third day at the Coral Beach Resort, Nadia decided to take the children to Mamia Beach, a protected area known for its pristine conditions and typically calm waters. According to later statements from resort staff, the Hassan family arrived at approximately 10:30 a.m., setting up near the shoreline among dozens of other beachgoers. The weather was ideal, clear skies with temperatures reaching 34 degrees Celsius, with only a gentle breeze disturbing the water's surface. Nadia, leveraging her extensive swimming experience and knowledge of marine environments, carefully monitored her children as they played in the shallows. Eyewitnesses later described her as attentive and cautious, frequently checking the water conditions and keeping the children within arm's reach. By midday, as temperatures peaked, Nadia allowed Amir and Layla to venture slightly farther into the bay's protected area, though still in water shallow enough for them to stand comfortably. At approximately 12:45 p.m., Nadia noticed Layla struggling with her flotation device and swam several meters farther out to assist her daughter. According to Mohammed Salah, a lifeguard on duty that day, Nadia was positioned approximately 30 meters from shore, in water that was roughly 2 meters deep, still within the designated swimming area. What happened next occurred with shocking speed. Beachgoers reported a sudden commotion in the water surrounding Nadia. According to Ahmed Farouk, a marine biologist vacationing nearby who witnessed the incident, the disturbance bore the classic signs of a large predator's approach. A visible wake on the surface followed by a directional surge. A tiger shark, later estimated by authorities to be between 3.5 and 4 meters, 13 feet in length, struck Nadia from below. The initial attack targeted her right thigh, the shark's teeth inflicting deep lacerations across her leg. Multiple witnesses recalled Nadia's scream of agony echoing across the beach, triggering immediate panic among nearby swimmers. In a display of extraordinary maternal instinct and presence of mind, Nadia's first reaction was not self-preservation, but protecting her children. Despite her severe injury, she pushed Layla toward the shore while positioning herself between the shark and her son. As Amir froze in terror, the shark circled back and made a second approach. This time, the predator seized Amir's left arm near the elbow. According to Farouk's account, Nadia immediately began striking the shark's sensitive gills and eyes, a response that marine biologists would later attribute to her professional knowledge rather than mere instinct. The counterattack momentarily disoriented the shark, causing it to release the boy. Lifeguard Salah and his colleague Yasmin Mahmoud had already entered the water, reaching the family within seconds of the second strike. Mahmoud secured Amir while Salah supported the increasingly weakened Nadia. Together, they retreated toward shore, as additional resort staff cleared other swimmers from the water. On the beach, Dr. Khalid Abbas, a British-Egyptian physician vacationing at the same resort, immediately began administering emergency first aid. Nadia's injuries were severe. The shark's teeth had severed her femoral artery, resulting in significant blood loss. Amir's wound, while traumatic, had narrowly missed major blood vessels and tendons. Resort management had contacted emergency services during the initial moments of the attack, and an ambulance arrived within 12 minutes. Both victims were transported to a general hospital, where surgical teams were standing by. Nadia underwent a 5-hour operation to repair vascular damage and stabilize her condition, while Amir's wound required extensive cleaning and 67 stitches. In the aftermath, Egyptian authorities temporarily closed several beaches in the area and launched an investigation into the unprecedented attack. Tiger sharks, while known to inhabit the Red Sea, rarely venture so close to populated shores. Dr. Mustafa El-Sheshtawi, head of the Red Sea Protectorate's Marine Biology Division, theorized that recent changes in fishing practices and unusually warm water temperatures may have altered traditional feeding patterns. The Hassan family remained in Hurghada for 3 additional weeks as Nadia's condition stabilized enough for transfer to a Cairo medical facility. Throughout this period, Nadia maintained remarkable composure, using the experience as an educational opportunity for her children to learn about marine conservation and respect oceanic predators. In an interview with a newspaper 6 months after the incident, Nadia emphasized that she harbored no ill will toward the shark or the resort. She acknowledged the inherent risks of entering any wild habitat and expressed gratitude for the quick response that saved both her life and her son's. Her professional perspective allowed her to contextualize the attack as an anomalous event rather than evidence of increased danger. The Hassan family's experience prompted Egyptian tourism authorities to implement enhanced safety protocols at Red Sea resorts, including increased aerial surveillance, additional lifeguard training focused on predator recognition, and more comprehensive emergency response planning. Shark deterrent technologies were installed at several popular beaches, though environmental groups successfully advocated against any culling programs. Perhaps most remarkably, the following summer found the Hassan family back in Hurghada, this time with Nadia delivering guest lectures at local schools about marine conservation and safety. Amir and Layla, showing remarkable resilience, returned to the water under close supervision, their mother's courage having taught them that fear could be acknowledged without becoming defining. The scars they carried became, in Nadia's words to her students, reminders of respect rather than reasons for fear, a philosophy that embodied her balanced approach as both a scientist and a survivor. Mossel Bay, South Africa, 2008. The southern coast of South Africa, with its dramatic meeting of the Indian and Atlantic Oceans, had long been recognized as one of the world's most prolific hunting grounds for great white sharks. The region's unique geography created nutrient-rich waters that supported complex marine ecosystems, drawing both prey and predator in significant numbers. Among the coastal communities that dotted this rugged shoreline, fishing remained both an economic necessity and a cultural heritage. In the small fishing community of Mossel Bay, approximately 400 kilometers east of Cape Town, 42-year-old Sifo Madiba had established himself as one of the area's most respected independent fishermen. A third-generation fisherman whose grandfather had pioneered sustainable practices in the region, Madiba operated a modest 6-meter vessel named Ithemba, meaning hope in Xhosa. His reputation for having intimate knowledge of local waters and consistently catching fish had made him something of a local legend. Themba Nkosi, Madiba's best friend since childhood and a frequent fishing partner, had followed a different professional path, working as a mechanical engineer in Cape Town. However, once a month, Nkosi would travel to his hometown of Mossel Bay to join Madiba for several days at sea, a tradition that had persisted for nearly 2 decades. Their friendship, fortified by these regular trips, was well known throughout the community. On October 3, 2008, Madiba and Nkosi embarked on what was intended to be a 3-day fishing trip, targeting yellowtail and snapper populations approximately 15 kilometers offshore. According to harbor records, they departed Mossel Bay Marina at 4:15 a.m., well before dawn. The weather forecast predicted ideal conditions: moderate seas with light southeasterly winds and excellent visibility. Johannes van der Merwe, a harbor master who had known both men for years, later recalled a brief conversation as they prepared the vessel. Madiba had mentioned spotting increased seal activity near Seal Island during his previous outing, a phenomenon often associated with the presence of great whites in the area. However, their planned route would take them well clear of this known predator hotspot. By all accounts, the first several hours proceeded without incident. Based on satellite tracking data recovered afterward, the Ithemba reached its intended fishing grounds by 6:30 a.m. and began methodical trolling operations. The vessel's fish finder logs indicated substantial activity at depths between 15 and 30 meters, suggesting potentially lucrative catches. What transpired next was reconstructed primarily through Nkosi's subsequent statements and physical evidence examined by marine safety investigators. At approximately 7:45 a.m., with the sun barely cresting the horizon, the men secured a significant catch: a 14-kilogram yellowtail that had struggled vigorously during retrieval. The commotion and blood in the water, while common during fishing operations, created what marine biologists would later describe as a classic attractant plume. According to Nkosi's account, he and Madiba had been celebrating their early success, with Madiba leaning against the vessel's gunwale to rinse fish blood from his hands in the ocean. Without warning, the water beside the boat erupted as a massive great white shark, later estimated to be more than 5 meters, 17 feet in length, launched partially out of the water in what experts term a breach attack. The force of the strike caught Madiba mid-torso, pulling him immediately overboard. Nkosi, responding with remarkable presence of mind, immediately reached for the boat hook while simultaneously activating the vessel's emergency position indicating radio beacon. By his admission, his actions were driven by instinct, rather than any confident expectation of success. The shark maintained its grip on Madiba, who remained conscious and struggling against the predator. According to Nkosi's testimony, his friend called out instructions even in these desperate moments, directing Nkosi to use the vessel's engine to create a disturbance in the water. This tactic sometimes deterred sharks during predatory episodes. Despite implementing this strategy and continuing his attempts to reach his friend with the boat hook, Nkosi watched in horror as the shark began what marine biologists term a surface-to-depth movement, a typical behavior when securing prey. Within seconds, both Madiba and the shark disappeared beneath the surface, leaving only expanding circles of crimson water. Driven by desperation rather than reason, Nkosi dove into the water. This extraordinary act of loyalty would later be cited in the South African Coast Guard's official commendation. For approximately 30 seconds, Nkosi searched the darkening water before recognizing the futility and danger of his actions. He returned to the vessel and immediately initiated full emergency protocols. The nearest South African Maritime Safety Authority vessel, the Cape Agulhas, responded to the distress signal, arriving on scene approximately 47 minutes after the incident. By this time, Nkosi had maintained a careful patrol of the area, searching for any sign of his friend. Coast Guard personnel found him in a state of physical exhaustion and emotional shock. An intensive search operation commenced involving 3 vessels, 2 helicopters, and a team of specialized divers. Despite these efforts extended over 4 days and covering more than 20 square kilometers, Saifo Madiba's body was never recovered, a circumstance that would later complicate both legal proceedings and the grieving process for his family. The investigation that followed revealed several notable factors. Analysis of the Athemba's hull showed distinctive shark tooth markings consistent with a great white, suggesting the predator may have brushed against the vessel during its initial approach. Furthermore, marine biologists noted that early October represented the beginning of what local researchers termed the active season for great whites in the region, with increased hunting behavior observed annually during this period. For the tight-knit community of Mossel Bay, the loss of Madiba represented more than a single tragedy. As Harbor Master van der Merwe explained to regional media, Saifo wasn't just another fisherman. He was living history, a connection to traditions and knowledge passed down through generations. The community established an annual Safety Awareness Day in Madiba's honor, focusing on predator awareness and maritime emergency procedures. Themba Nkosi faced considerable psychological challenges in the aftermath, struggling with survivor's guilt and post-traumatic stress. However, with support from both Madiba's family and the broader community, he eventually established the Saifo Madiba Foundation, which funded safety equipment for independent fishermen and educational scholarships for children from fishing families. In a poignant ceremony 1 year after the incident, Nkosi led a fleet of local fishing vessels to the site of the attack, where traditional Xhosa rituals were performed to honor his friend's memory. Speaking to gathered mourners, Nkosi reflected that while the ocean had taken his friend, it had been the source of Madiba's greatest joy throughout his life, a paradox that many who make their living from the sea come to understand. The incident, while tragic, led to tangible improvements in safety protocols for small-scale fishing operations along South Africa's southern coast. Emergency communication equipment became mandatory, shark shields were subsidized for independent operators, and enhanced tracking systems were implemented region-wide, ensuring that Saifo Madiba's legacy extended beyond memory into meaningful protection for those who followed his path. Off the frigid coast of Cape Cod, Massachusetts, in the autumn of 2018, 30-year-old scuba diver Maximilian Max Hollingsworth prepared for what he believed would be a routine exploration of the SS James Longstreet, a Liberty ship sunk during World War II to serve as an artificial reef. The waters surrounding Cape Cod had grown increasingly notorious over the previous decade, with great white shark sightings multiplying year after year as the seal population, their primary food source, had rebounded following conservation efforts. Despite warnings from local marine authorities about increased shark activity in the area, Max, with over 500 dives logged across 15 countries, felt confident in his abilities and experience. The morning of October 17th dawned clear but cold, with a brisk wind chopping the gray Atlantic waters. Max had convinced his reluctant diving partner Alejandro Fuentes to join him in exploring the wreck, which rested approximately 80 feet below the surface, about 3 miles off the coast. The captain of their chartered boat, Elias Whitman, a weathered 60-year-old who had spent 4 decades navigating these waters, had expressed concern about the timing of their dive. The previous week, a tagged great white measuring 14 feet had been detected in the vicinity, and the water visibility was poor due to recent storms. Max, however, insisted they proceed. He had traveled from Seattle specifically to explore this wreck and document its deteriorating condition for a maritime history blog he maintained. The dive would add to his growing reputation as an authority on shipwreck preservation in North American waters. Alejandro, sensing his friend's determination, agreed to act as his safety diver, but insisted they remain vigilant and not separate during the exploration. At around 9:47 a.m., with full equipment checks completed, Max and Alejandro descended into the murky Atlantic. The water temperature registered at a bracing 52 degrees Fahrenheit, and visibility extended barely 15 feet, considerably worse than they had hoped. The 2 divers followed their planned route to the wreck. Arriving at the massive hull after a 7-minute descent, Max immediately began photographing the ship's deteriorating structure, fascinated by the marine growth that had transformed the metal behemoth into an underwater oasis of biodiversity. 40 minutes into their dive, as they explored the ship's cavernous cargo hold, Alejandro felt an inexplicable sense of unease wash over him. The water had grown unusually still, and the smaller fish that had surrounded them moments earlier had vanished. He tugged at Max's wetsuit, pointing to his dive computer to indicate they should begin their ascent. Max nodded reluctantly, taking one final photograph before turning toward the exit. It was then that the massive shadow materialized from the gloom beyond their line of sight. A great white shark, later estimated to be 16 feet in length, appeared with alarming suddenness. The predator moved with deliberate purpose rather than aggression, circling the divers once before disappearing again into the murk. Alejandro signaled urgently that they needed to ascend, but Max, his professional curiosity momentarily overriding his caution, took several additional photographs of the retreating shark. That momentary hesitation proved catastrophic. As Max finally turned to follow Alejandro toward the surface, the great white returned with explosive speed. In contrast to its previous, seemingly curious behavior, the shark now charged directly at Max. Whether attracted by the electronic signals from his camera equipment or mistaking his black wetsuit for a seal in the poor visibility, the predator struck with devastating force. Its massive jaws clamped down on Max's air tank, the pressure immediately compromising the equipment. The force of the attack sent Max tumbling through the water, disorienting him as the shark thrashed its head from side to side. Alejandro, witnessing the attack, later reported that the sound of teeth grinding against metal had been audible even underwater, a horrifying screech that seemed to reverberate through the wreck. By remarkable fortune, the shark had targeted the tank, not Max himself. As the predator released its grip, seemingly confused by the taste of neoprene and metal rather than flesh, Max kicked desperately away. Bubbles streamed from his damaged regulator as the compromised tank began to fail. Alejandro rushed to his partner's side, offering his secondary air source as they started an emergency ascent. The shark circled below them, its massive form becoming less distinct as they rose through the water column. Each second of their ascent stretched interminably as they maintained the controlled pace necessary to avoid decompression sickness, despite the imminent threat of a second attack. Captain Whitman, alerted by their emergency ascent bubbles, positioned the boat directly above them. When they broke the surface, 73 agonizing seconds after the initial attack, Alejandro shouted for immediate assistance. The crew hauled both men aboard with practiced efficiency. Max's face drained of color, his breathing rapid and shallow from the combination of oxygen deprivation and shock. The punctured tank had maintained just enough pressure to keep him alive during their ascent, but it had completely failed moments after they reached the surface. Max sustained no physical injuries beyond bruising where the tank harness had dug into his shoulders during the shark's attack. However, the psychological trauma ran deep. In the months following the incident, he suffered from recurring nightmares and developed a temporary phobia of open water. The photographs he captured of the shark moments before the attack were published, providing rare documentation of great white behavior around divers. By 2021, 3 years after his near-fatal encounter, Max had returned to diving, though he now specialized in freshwater cave exploration rather than open ocean dives. He frequently gave talks at diving safety conferences, emphasizing the importance of heeding local warnings about marine predator activity and strictly adhering to safety protocols. His experience served as a powerful reminder that even the most experienced divers had to respect and exercise caution around the ocean's apex predators. The incident was later incorporated into the marine fisheries educational programs, highlighting that while shark attacks remain statistically rare, taking proper precautions in known shark territories was essential for those who ventured into their domain.